Good
Hi,
morning.
Erik.
Hello.
Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you. Can you also hear me?
Yes, can Erik, yeah. Did you get up early, Robert, to see the rest of the presentations?
You must be kidding. You know, it's 6:30 in the morning here. Time to get my coffee, and that's about all. I'll just,
Good afternoon, all. Good morning, all.
Good day, Robert. Good day, all.
Good morning, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Congratulations, everybody, on correctly arriving in the right panel and in good time. Fantastic.
Magic.
So we've got 3 minutes or so, and then we'll get kick-started. Has everyone been able to? I see we've got attendees, so we'll play it quiet and get going shortly.
Right.
See you in a bit.
Just a reminder, guys, that when you're not talking, if you could have your mic on mute, because as we know, when we had the trial the other day, there was quite a bit of back scatter. Well, good afternoon and a very warm welcome to the Towage panel of the UK Chamber of Shipping Virtual Conference 2021. In the next hour, we'll be following the theme of creating pathways to 2030 by focusing on some of the strategic issues and opportunities that harbour towage might encounter on that journey. The coming decade is likely to be exciting but challenging for the tug industry, especially with regard to the demands of decarbonisation and energy source, of equality, and in the working environment. Our panel today, kindly sponsored by AMP Group and Camel-led Shipyards, is made up of leading industry experts that include Ben Harris, Head of Claims in London at Shipowners P&I Club, the leading P&I club for small vessels, providing cover for over 7,000 tugs in 91 countries worldwide. Ben is a qualified solicitor and has been working with Shipowners for 20 years, working for the club in the UK, Australia and Canada. Erik van Schaik, design and proposal manager from Damen Shipyards in the Netherlands, one of the largest tug builders and designers in the world. Erik graduated as a mechanical engineer and served in the Royal Dutch Navy before joining Damen. And Kasper Karlsen, Chief Operating Officer of Svitzer Europe, whom he joined last June after 13 years with Maersk Drilling. Kasper holds a master's degree in naval architecture and marine engineering. Rob G. Allan, Executive Chairman of Naval Architects Robert Allan Limited, based out of Vancouver, Canada. Rob's ambition has always been to design some of the best tugboats afloat, a goal proven by the number of Robert Allan designed tugs now seen around the globe. I'm your moderator for the session, and my name is Steve Dougal. I've been a shipbroker in the tug industry for over 30 years, a fellow of the Institute of Chartered Shipbrokers, and the Managing Director of Century Marine Services Limited, an associate member of the British Tug Owners Association. Now, the vast majority of tugs operate with traditional diesel engines, and due to their tonnage and areas of operation, most fall out of the scope of international requirements. But decarbonisation is likely to be the greatest challenge facing the industry in the next decade as local, national and international regulations tighten. Harbour tugs are an integral part of a port's infrastructure, and as ports decarbonise, tugs will do the same and have the potential to be leading lights for pilot projects. The pressure is already on with various ports bringing forward stricter limits on emissions. But what about the infrastructure needed? Decarbonisation is going to be a demanding exercise, and one that is likely to be costly and complex. The industry has been preparing the groundwork for some time, but still there are only a very small number of alternative fuel tugs in operation globally. The compact and operational aspects of tugboats present an array of technical complications in decarbonisation, so the industry really has its work cut out to overcome these challenges. There could be a lot of opportunity, but high quality tugboats and conversions are not cheap, and there are feasibility questions as to how the industry can absorb these costs when there are only minimal returns as it is. Will the industry need state intervention and support? And then we also have to consider the human angle and how we look after those working in the industry. Tug safety has improved considerably through increased professionalism and competence, but there remains much to do in bettering the health and safety of our crews. Fatigue remains an issue too, and the possibility of tugs becoming busier due to port digitalisation and initiatives such as the just-in-time arrivals mean that this is an area that will need careful consideration and managing. And if our businesses are to remain vibrant and successful, then like our ferry and deep sea colleagues, we have to be far better at encouraging young people, and especially women, into the tug industry. How can we do that? These are some of the issues that will be looked at, and I'm sure the responses from our experts this afternoon will give us all food for thought. They will also provide a steer for the UK Chamber and the BTA in their policy focus and objectives for the next decade. Now, we do have a very tight schedule, and so please forgive me if we have to cut short some of the answers in order to allow other questions to be asked. And at the end, there will be a short Q&A session, so if you have a question to pose, then please do so via the text chat to the right of the screen, making sure that you type the question into the session chat rather than the event chat, as that will go to all in the plenary. And after this session, there will be a break before we return to the plenary, where the moderators of each panel will provide a summary of the key takeaways and strategic issues that we have discussed. And we as Towage will be in the second plenary with wind and offshore. So without further ado then, let's move on to the biggest challenge now facing our industry. And Kasper, perhaps you could start the ball rolling and look at the road to decarbonisation for towage to 2030 from the tug owner's point of view?
Thank you for that. And yes, I can try. If I had the recipe, then I wouldn't be sitting here, I guess. Then I would be placing my bets on that. So I think where we are right now, it's a matter of still testing a lot of different technologies, also towards 2030, which is decarbonization in 2030 is to begin with a very ambitious target to set, right? Because I think we have been for years been testing different solutions. However, I don't think that we've found anything that really fits everything. And also we should remember that we're up against the conventional combustion engine, which is a very versatile invention, right? It will start anywhere and anytime, and it will go as long as you like it to be going. And if you look at other technologies like battery technologies that we have been looking at, and we also have hybrid tugs with batteries operating in our fleet, it sets some limitations in terms of your operating modus, your operating pattern, and it definitely also sets some requirements to the surrounding infrastructure, which right now is a little bit immature in that sense. But of course, it's very interesting to follow the different technologies. We've just embarked on a solid oxide fuel cell project also, and without really knowing what comes out of it. But I think as an industry, we are obliged to, of course, to take this challenge and turn it into an opportunity, basically, and then test out. But I don't think that we have found the silver bullet for towage industry or the shipping industry in general yet, actually. So that's in short my view on it right now.
Indeed.
We are testing.
Excellent. That's I think exactly where we all are. But Erik, from the builder's point of view, what are you up to there in order to look at this pathway?
You're muted.
Sorry for that. In Europe, the road to decarbonization is for 2030, 40% reduction as a target. And in different parts of the world, that target might be different. But in 2050, the ambitious target is zero carbon. Like Kasper already said, there are different solutions at this point of time in the market. We as Damen see that the way we look at it, we think for the vessels with small autonomy and a predictable operating envelope, electrification and operating on shore power is at this moment available technology, and already you can already make a new vessel completely electric, which is able to do the berthing unberthing operation. On the other hand, of course, the challenge is to be competitive with it, it is of course more expensive, and only when you look at the total cost of ownership over the timeline of the vessel, and electricity is available in green and cheap form, then it is also a business case. Green electricity must be made more available in the future at more places at a lower cost price. That's also a challenge, of course, for the harbors and the local authorities.
Indeed.
To make it happen that way. On the other hand, you also see for the vessels with larger autonomy, other solutions like methanol and hydrogen. The difference is, like methanol is not without carbon by the vessel itself, but then they are looking at the whole cycle and talking like that about being carbon neutral. That's different than when you have a zero emission vessel, of course. But there are solutions, but you have a difference between looking at the existing fleet and finding solutions for existing vessels.
So if I could stop you there, Erik, and bring in Rob here to give a take on that. Rob, you've been around quite a long time. You have seen wild developments in the tug market. Where do you see it going?
Well, thank you for reminding me, Steve, that I'm old. But I've seen incredible changes in the tug industry in my 50 years in this business, and currently we're in the throes of it's a real revolution in ship design and construction. But I think the technical solutions are largely there. I think we have an economic problem, and that's on two fronts primarily. You know, there has been such an incredible amount of reinvestment in the tug fleet globally in the last 10 or 15 years that you've got a relatively new fleet. So that's a very expensive set of assets to discard in favor of all electric or even to refit. So I think, you know, because of that, you know, we will see primarily sort of refit type investments in the next 10, 15 years. You know, we designed the world's first hybrid harbor tug more than 10 years ago, and every project that we've seen since then has had, let's call it, state support in one form or another.
Yeah.
And I can't see that changing unless every port in a largely strategic area agrees on the same philosophy of requiring that, you know, you have a carbon neutral or zero carbon tug base.
Absolutely, and I had a discussion a couple of days ago with somebody about the cost of conversions alone is quite astronomical. But Erik, from your point of view there in Damen, how do you see the industry funding this? Because obviously it is going to be a very expensive operation indeed.
Yeah, at this moment, we have to face the same problem as Robert has, but in the market, the fully electric projects we have, those are for vessels which, certain ports, of course, put also the target on the table. Okay, we want to be zero emission at 2040 or 2050, and they buy a vessel now. Vessel has a lifetime of 30 years. If you are going to buy something new at this moment, and you are at 2020, if you buy a diesel tug, you might face the problem that within 10 or 20 years, you are not able to operate it anymore. If you buy a fully electric tug, you can say, I can operate at least for the lifetime of the vessel because it's already zero emission. On the other hand, if the electricity, the money you save on the fuel you normally buy compared to what the cost price of the electricity is, and on the maintenance side, over the lifetime of the vessel, the total cost of ownership doesn't have to be more, but that's also depending on the location where you operate, because there are locations where electricity is still very high price. Then it's not working like that, and then you have to invest more. You cannot be competitive there. And then it will not happen unless you get support from the government or something else.
Yeah. Yep, no, indeed. And Kasper, from the tug owner's perspective, you believe that we need state assistance here in terms of costs that are going to be involved?
Yeah, definitely. And to complement Erik, there, he's absolutely right. We are important if we go electrified and go battery solutions. Of course, it's important that we have the shoreside infrastructure to support it, right? although we are operating inside port areas most of the times, we also need a versatile fleet that we can actually use in different ports, and we can roam them across. So range can become an issue with an all electrical tug, and then the infrastructure needs to be there. So in those terms, it's as Robert also says, it's very important that both states, authorities, and regulators, that they also push here. And without their help, I don't think the transition will not happen by itself. We have an obligation to serve our customers and stay competitive in that in our industry, and I think that we jointly can make the transformation, but it will need some guidance from the regulators and authorities, and not least the customers. They also play a role here.
No, indeed, and especially as much of this is obviously going to be pushed from the state area, from local or national or international governments, and so they have their targets, but the industry has to be able to afford that when it comes along, and it is an expensive process, as we know. Rob, you just wanted to come in there?
Yeah, just although it doesn't achieve the complete decarbonization target, I really think that hybrid solutions are the most sensible for the towage industry. Technically and economically, it makes much more sense than going all electric. I mean, all electric is certainly possible, but as Kasper said, you've got all these range issues. You've got some concerns about fire risks and so forth. So the hybrid solution, given the typical operating profile of a tug, just really makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So it doesn't quite get to a decarbonized solution, but you certainly significantly reduce the total emissions.
And it gives us time up to 2050 to develop those ones that do come along, which will be zero emissions, hopefully, at that stage.
Yeah.
And talking of which, then, in terms of the future of tug design, I mean, looking at hybrids and LNG tugs, as we know, the problems of tugboats is actually their physical size. It's not like we're dealing with some very large units here, and that, of course, has an effect on what we can actually do. In terms of that, Rob, where do you see that going?
Well, in the under 500 gross ton size of vessel, which is about 32 meters, it's pretty difficult to come up with solutions. I mean, you can rule out, for instance, LNG or anything like that. It simply doesn't work in small vessels. Batteries are heavy and require a lot of space, but you're replacing diesel engines ostensibly. So the electric solutions are all viable, within that sort of, shall we say, the smaller size range. It's not a huge technical challenge, and if you can eliminate a loss of the SCR type equipment that's associated with Tier 3 emission systems, then you saved a lot of space. So it's not such a big deal. As I say, I believe it's fundamentally all just an economic issue.
Yeah, absolutely. And Kasper, in terms of tug design, from your experience so far, what are you seeing coming along from your point of view?
Well, so far it's been very short, but I've learned a thing or two. So I at least learned that the trend, of course, is that we are fond of the ASDs right now. We also see innovative ideas being tested on different constellations. You can say hybrids between tractors and ASDs, and I think we'll see more of that going forward on the propulsion side. I agree with Robert that right here and now the hybrid solution is probably where we will see more coming out, and as mentioned, we already have some of them operating. But I think from an operational point of view, a tug owner point of view, it's the challenge is also that we see bigger and bigger vessels that we need to service. And we don't really like to see our tugs getting physically bigger, but the power requirements increasing. So how do we solve that puzzle going forward, right? That is a challenge, and I think so far the development has kind of honored it. But if we go to other energy sources that, as mentioned, batteries, for example, requires a lot of space, and so do other types of energy sources. It becomes a challenge.
Space is the issue there, isn't it? Because if you have your entire tugboat filled with energy, where do you have space for the other things that need to be, like crew and things like that?
Exactly, and that's I guess that's up for Erik to figure that out, and Robert to figure out how do we fit it in there, right? But it's because we like the 25-30 meter long tugs and with 80 tons bullet pull, right? But how do you do that? How do you make that design with a alternative energy source also viable?
Indeed.
Well, you go autonomous, and you eliminate all the crew facilities and the wheelhouse and everything else. You just have a little receptor on the top, and there you go.
Indeed. So, Erik, what's your take, Erik, on the future of tug design here from the Damen perspective? I mean, where are you going?
We are currently building an RSV 2513 fully electric, but also still with generator sets. So it's more or less a hybrid vessel where you can do all the berthing, unberthing operations fully electric. And if you have to do a job like firefighting or some other job which is needs more autonomy, we still have 2 generator sets to do also that jobs. But most of the vessels we sell to harbors, they are in the harbor operating for 90% of the time with berthing, unberthing, and they only do the other jobs at the site. So you don't want to size your battery pack on what you do once in a while. So you have your generator sets to operate on diesel at that moment, so you can still have a long range. And that's the generator sets, the whole electric system and the electric propulsion, including batteries, is within 24 meters load line length. And then you still have 6 persons on board, and we can fit the whole same package also in an ASD 2830. Then you have 10 persons accommodation, you have a large ISD, and you still can operate zero emission in the port. So I think, hybrid with more or less battery capacity is very good possible. And like Robert said, natural gas and that kind of solutions, then you get a much bigger vessel quite soon. That's not really easy. And also not so much helping in the carbon exhaust.
Great. So in the interim, it looks like there's a definite consensus towards hybrid here as an interim measure, of course, also looking at other options as and when they come along. Just moving to a bit more of the human factor here, the safety record of the towage industry, it has improved considerably over the last 20 years. The incidents still occur, but from your perspective, what would most enhance safety in the towage industry? And Ben, as you've been sitting there while all the development part has been going on, maybe you can give us your views on this.
Thanks, Steve. Hi, everyone. I think the first thing I would start by saying is that for anyone who wasn't able to attend the safety panel discussion this morning, I think all of the sessions are being recorded. So when they become available, I'd recommend anyone to go and have a look at that session, because although it wasn't specific industry, I think a lot of the issues that were discussed in that session apply to the towage industry equally. For me, it was a fascinating discussion, and I think the best thing about it was that it was quite a challenging discussion. Not everyone agrees in terms of what the right direction of travel is, and I think that can only be a good thing to have that kind of debate. For me personally, I think what is clear is that there are a number of threads when you talk about enhancement and safety. Yes, I think the numbers prove that safety has improved, and in the towage industry as well. But everyone accepts that there is more to do. There are still incidents happening every day at sea, or even when vessels are alongside, and there are a huge number of near misses. And from the club's perspective, as an insurer here to support our members and protect them in their operations, we are interested in the here and now in terms of the enhancements that tug owners and operators can introduce in their day-to-day operations from next week. And we're also wanting to look to the future and support our members in terms of what the enhancement of safety looks like in 2030. And as Rob mentioned, that could be more to do with the autonomous sphere and what does safety look like then. But for the purposes of now and looking at enhancements, I think that the club would very, very much support the idea of an encompassing safety culture. That ultimately we see as the most important thing, because within that umbrella, if you have a safety culture, it will pick up a lot of the incidents. When you do a root cause analysis, there's lots of things that we see. I mean, over the last 2 years, we've seen over 350 incidents relating to towage, predominantly navigational related, but a lot of it comes back to typical things that you would see in terms of towage plans, passage planning, identifying ports of refuge when weather deteriorates, equipment failure, and all of the usual things. Of course, there is the human element in it as well in terms of training and things like that. But all of these things in the here and now is if you have an owner and an operator that is investing in the safety culture, ensuring the crew feel like they are part of that. That's that's the real enhancement that we see now.
Indeed, and I guess a lot of that is through better training rather than more training. Actually, better training. Kasper, is this where your experience is in terms of your crews?
Try to chip in. So I think I'm gratified to see that we've started to look at safety in a different way in this industry and other maritime industries as well, right? We have some years ago it was a rate towards the zero, so it was a zero target philosophy that we applied, and I think that's we come to the acknowledgement that of course incidents they happen. But it's a matter of how we actually respond to those incidents when they happen. Nobody goes to work to hurt themselves or hurt a colleague, but how can we set up the technical and procedural and organizational barriers to mitigate the consequences when these incidents happen, and basically take it from a blame game kind of culture to a more what can we learn from our incidents, what can we learn from our high potentials, and what can we learn from our near misses, and yes, there's a procedural angle to that, the procedural barriers. How do we arrange the work and the work processes? There is an organizational element to it. So how do we make sure that the capabilities and the competencies of our crew are sufficient and the awareness is there? And then, of course, lastly, there's also the technical barriers that we need to put in place. So what physical barriers can we put in place? The human mind is very intuitive. It will also always intuitively look for the easy way. So we need to apply that thinking in the way we design our vessels also.
Indeed. And Rob, when you're designing a vessel, how do you look at this aspect of safety? Where do you come from here?
Well, we take that very seriously, and we've been investing very over the last several years in making sure that we as designers and so that we can translate the information to the owners and the operators, so we really understand what the ultimate safety limits of these vessels are. And particularly in the escort business, where we have very powerful tugs with very high externally applied loads, it's not the same equation as one used to face with more conventional tug design. But I believe that applies across the board. It doesn't just have to be an escort tug. In general, I would say, the last 20 years or so, the status of tug design globally has improved very significantly. I think, in general, but certainly not universally, it's a pretty safe set of designs that are out there. So then the equation becomes one of safety and in operation, and making sure that the operators understand where those operational limits are, because every vessel has limits. And the big problem, as Kasper was saying, that you like small vessels with a lot of power, and that presents the challenge ultimately. The ratio of power to size has changed dramatically in the last 25 years.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. And Erik, you are obviously building a lot of these vessels. Erik, where are you seeing there's any changes in the enhancement of safety here?
Yeah, of course, you have the escort tugs, like Robert talked about. But on the other side, we still also have a lot of normal small harbor tugs. In general, in the design, the very basic things like good view lines and dry working decks, high freeboard, good stability. Those are very obvious things. But in most designs, they apply to rules and regulations. That's true, what Robert says. Most designs which are out there are according to the rules. But on the other hand, things like fuel lines and thermal homes, those are not in the rules and regulations. So there is, on top of the rules and regulations, still a big field where you can optimize furthermore to make, by quite simple things, the vessel more safe. It's true that a lot of vessels are more compact nowadays than they used to be, and lighter with more power. In some aspect, you might say, okay, that must be less safe. On the other side, it gives you also ability to quicker react, and if you can accelerate faster, decelerate faster, and maneuver faster with a high-powered small vessel compared to a big vessel with a big mass of inertia, it might also be a safety aspect. And so it's depending also on the operation which you are doing, if a larger vessel gives you more safety or not. I think apart from the vessel, the crew is still very important. Mm-hmm. And training is very important, that was already said. And we still have a lot of customers where we deliver the vessel, where we still have to put effort in letting people spend money on training and familiarization with the vessel, where it should be more or less always done, because that's very important for safety.
Indeed. And obviously most of the accidents, I guess, are still caused is human error here at the end of the day, or human input perhaps. But this brings us nicely around to our next subject, which of course is fatigue, because fatigue is a big issue. There are various things apace in ports, like port digitalization, just-in-time arrivals, and of course there are perhaps maybe fatigue issues arising from this. Kasper, what's your sort of experience so far on these issues?
You can draw the parallel that digitalization means fatigue actually quite the quite the contrary. We see a digitalization in everywhere, and yes, it is a change to our crews. It's a change to our employees, also on the shore side, and in the short run, every change is hard for a human being and needs to sink in, and you need to adapt. But the digital tools that we have and that we are trying to introduce today will have the objective of removing waste from the processes and making it more transparent and improving the communication between both operators ashore and the tug crew and the ports and customers. And I think so. I think digitalization offers a lot of opportunities to actually spend time on the more value-creating conversations with your colleagues, with your customers. Yes, it is. Any transformation, a digital transformation, takes time, and it is tough, and you will have people banging their head against the wall. But it's. I think digitalization will take this industry also to a next level where we have less waste in our processes and actually a more motivating and engaging work environment.
Yeah, and but obviously with just-in-time arrivals and things like this, you're going to move into, there is a rhythm in the human body, and so you do have a lack of rhythm in the work pattern, and that of course sometimes disturbs the human body and brings on fatigue. Ben, perhaps you have any thoughts on this from the club's perspective?
Yes. I think the first thing I mentioned, Kasper makes a great observation in relation to when you consider digitalization, and you would think that would be something that would improve fatigue and wellness issues. But I think that kind of really puts a spotlight on fatigue and wellness, in the sense that when you look at incidents from the club's perspective, incidents that do happen, it's through detailed root cause analysis that actually you can unearth some of these issues to do with fatigue and wellness. Some of these root causes were not well known or at least discussed some years ago, and the great thing is that they are discussed and there is a lot more awareness about these issues now. I think that with digitalization, the risk is that these issues become accentuated because you do have more port movements, and if the welfare and the fatigue issues within the crews operating tugs within a port don't keep up, then, like I say, the issue actually is accentuated rather than mitigated. In terms of how to manage that, there are some excellent programs already going on. ICE1 are involved. There's the International Port Welfare Partnership, which is focusing on these issues and providing support. There's, generally outside the towage industry, there's also the happiness index, which many people will be aware of, which provides really useful data from the crews themselves in terms of welfare and fatigue issues. So I think that the sharing of this data and the awareness will very much help manage the issues. And finally, I think there's also, when you think about digitalization, you think about technology. There's lots, I think, to improve on there in terms of technology, wearable technology. The club's done a lot of work with a company called the Sleep and Fatigue Research Company, where investigating the ability to wear wearable technologies for crews that monitor their fatigue and their sleep, and how that interplays with their shift hours. So lots that can be done to help manage this issue.
Indeed, and you mentioned something called the happiness index, which is outside the towage industry. And if that's good for the crews, why isn't the towage industry using it, or why aren't we in there?
Yeah, and I think it's part of, I believe I'm right in saying it's in conjunction, or if not orchestrated by the Mission Seafarers. So it may be that some are, but if not, then it would be, I think, a great thing to promote.
Indeed. And Erik, from the builder and designer point of view there, in terms of crew welfare and fatigue, what are you generally looking at?
The comfort on board is also important for the happiness of the crew on board and fatigue, of course. Lower noise levels, lower vibration levels, and a better working environment is helping. Apart from that, the human-machine interface is something where we are continuously have been working on over the last few years, trying to get clear from our customers what kind of information is necessary to view for the captain and the people on board, what information from the central alarm and monitoring system is not necessary to monitor to display, because if you continuously get too much information, that's also very making people overloaded.
Indeed.
So that's what we are trying to prevent. Get the right information at the right moment to take the decisions, and let the vessel help the people on board as much as possible. That's what we're working on.
Great. And so perhaps we can move on to another human area here, and in the sense that the towage industry offers a positive work-home balance. I mean, tug crews sometimes do 7 days on, 7 days off, and things like that. But it has a bit of a problem, at least in this country, I think, attracting women into our industry, and indeed young people. Where are we going wrong, or where can we go on that? And maybe perhaps Rob, you could come from somebody in Vancouver there and give us a couple of your thoughts on this.
Well, it's an interesting question. I don't think that lack of female participation in the onboard side of the industry is unique to the UK. I think it's pretty universal. I have encountered very, very few women crew members in my travels and visits to tugs. But you're right. It is an industry with a positive work-home balance. It's basically kind of shift work, and should be attractive to women. I think probably the arena that would or the option that would offer the best choice is to create all female crews, so that you eliminate risks of harassment and other challenges. And then people like Kasper could compare the damage ratios between the female crew and the male crew, and I expect they may see significant differences there too. So
I think Kasper will be coming on to that a little later, but that's a very, very good point.
Yeah, it's one of those industries that is so male dominated. It's hard to see the breakthroughs, but I think it'll come. How we can stimulate it, I'm not really so sure. I think we're offering pretty comfortable onboard amenities for crews of all types. So it's really just a question of making women aware of the opportunities and making sure that they're safe participating in it.
Indeed. And Ben, from your point of view, where do you see this in terms of encouraging more women, more young people into our industry?
I think it's, for me, the same reasons that attract men to the industry and all the things we love about it should be, and I see no reason why they wouldn't be the same reasons that would attract women. I think the reality is that more can be done to promote the industry generally, perhaps even, and in areas that recognise that this is an industry for women as well as men. More needs to be done in that area. And I took a straw poll amongst my colleagues on this point, actually, to get a kind of a range of views. And I think that generally people think that if you were to promote women, you can champion them in certain circumstances, industry press and things like that, then you're going some way to raising the profile of what we all recognise. And there are many women. I think I saw a statistic earlier: 937,000 jobs in the UK maritime sector, and there's many women that are in it already. So it's just a question of promoting that and and seeing them see the potential in it.
We need to bring them into the towage side for sure. Kasper, you have some good experience here. I think you have a tug called the Svitzer Monte Cristi, I believe, which is an all-woman crew. So can you tell us about the difference on that to perhaps what's happening on the other tugs?
Well, I wish I could, but I haven't pulled any, as Robert suggests, any data on performance specifically on that tug compared to others, and I don't think that's appropriate either. I think just a few thoughts on what Ben said there. So promoting our industries and actually highlighting and promoting our role models, irrespective of gender, is important here, right? And then keep on challenging our unconscious bias towards this being a male-dominated industry. I think the towage industry, I come from the drilling contractor, which is even more male-dominated. In comparison, the towage industry offers, irrespective of gender, it just offers very, very good working conditions and work home balance in general, as you say, because you are working in predominantly in a port where you have shift kind of based work. So on that matter, I think those barriers are gone, and there's nothing telling me that they couldn't make towage even more attractive. And I think we just on the gender side, we haven't really found the golden nugget. Yes, we have experience with an all-female crew down in the Dominican Republic, and I think we will try to pursue that even further. But it's still only 1 out of 440 tugs globally. So there's still some way to go. On the shore side, we've managed to make it actually attractive and display the career opportunities, which is a big part of this as well. And I think on the shore side, we're up at around 40%, at least in the head office locations, 40% women, which is a good achievement. And why is it important? Well, it's a diverse workforce also in terms of gender. We know that it's a versatile line of thoughts and more innovation, and basically better solutions and better customer experience at the end. So that is a proven. So, but as an industry, we're not there. And Svitzer, we are working on it actively. But there's still some way to go.
Indeed.
But structurally, I don't think that there's that many obstacles, actually.
Yeah, but it's a big marketplace. You know, we're competing with all sorts of glamorous industries, if you like, to attract young people and women in. And so we've got to fight for it. And we are an exciting industry after all. Albeit, you know, as you said, is at sea still very male-dominated, but hopefully that's going to change, at least in the short term. So then moving on to Ben. Now this is going to be your subject here in terms of it's all our bedtime reading, the UK standard conditions for towage. Now, is this fit for purpose for the next 10 years for what's happening on this road to decarbonisation?
Thanks, Steve. I would say yes and no to that. I think that focusing on the UK standard towage conditions, and then I'll have a brief comment about other contracts afterwards. But on the UK STC, my opinion is that is it fit for purpose, and will it be a viable contract by 2030? I have my concerns, to be honest, because what we have seen over the last few decades is a constant erosion of the UK STC. There are various reasons for that erosion. There is, I think, enforceability issues. So essentially, as most people will be aware, the UK STC includes exclusion clauses, which are considered in today's regime quite draconian, because they put the majority of the liability onto the vessel being assisted, apart from a few circumstances where liability would stay with the tug. But for the most part, the intention is to put the liability onto the towed vessel. There was good reason for that when the form was created back in 1933. In reality, you had small tugs assisting large vessels, and in these days you have slightly bigger tugs, but assisting even bigger vessels. And back then, and they certainly didn't have the limits of cover then, and certainly not the earnings either. That would reflect them taking on the liability of assisting large vessels into port, where, as we know then, as we know now, things go wrong and significant liabilities can be attracted. Where we are at now is that, like I say, the courts in various different jurisdictions don't like contracts, even contracts between companies where you have exclusion clauses like this. They're kind of initially viewed quite dimly unless that particular jurisdiction has quite a good knowledge of the history behind the contract. In combined with that, you have the fact that there is more competition within the towage sector. Such that tug operators necessarily in certain circumstances or in certain jurisdictions will accept to provide assistance not on UK STC conditions but on other terms. And then finally, there's also incorporation problems around contracts, because often towage is not provided directly to the towed vessel but through an agent. And we see, the frequency of incidents where after the event there is challenge in relation to whether the contract was even incorporated or not is very, very common. And finally, the difference between back in 1933 and now is that the tug owners are able to, they do have the limits of cover. From a club like ourselves, we provide high limits of cover. But the point is that the premium that is charged for the current liability regime and the risk that we perceive when operators are using UKSTC, that demands one premium. If tug owners want to accept more liability, then the premium would have to increase. And then the whole economic dynamic between a tug owner offering towage assistance and a carrier accepting that assistance will have to change, because the rates I expect would have to go up to counter the premium that they'll be charged. So it is quite a complicated dynamic. I think on top of that, the last revision of the UKSTC was in 1986. So it's 35 years really, and I think that it would make sense for the industry to engage to see whether there is still actually, to validate the idea that in the right circumstances, tug owners should not bear the risk of harbour towage. And if that is validated, then more work needs to be done in terms of ensuring that these contracts are enforceable and properly incorporated.
Indeed, it does sound like this is going to be a discussion ongoing in the next few years, and to see if we can get the centenary of the UK standard towing conditions in 2033. I know I'm just looking, time is running on here, and we do have a couple of questions. One here from Kerry Foster. Would government financial support to help create port infrastructures to support future fuel tugs help get demonstrator vessels on contracts? So if government were to give support there, would that help get some of these as a test vessel? Anybody like to answer that? Kasper, perhaps?
Can you just repeat the question?
Yes. Would government financial support to help create port infrastructure to support future fuel tugs help get demonstrator vessels on contract?
Yeah, I think that's what I alluded to. That this is a joint effort, right? We need the ports, we need the regulators to also create some push in this transformation. The industry itself cannot do it, and yes, we are with many of these new fuel types, or all new fuel types, we will be dependent on new infrastructures being set up. Yes.
And Erik, do you see that as well?
Yeah, that's if we, depending on what kind of fuel we talk about, of course. But yeah, if you look at big ports worldwide, for big ports, you see already a lot of electrification because of there are automated big container terminals, which fully electric robot cranes. And a lot of harbors are pushing big vessels into cold ironing. And to make that possible, there's already a lot of investment in harbors like in Rotterdam and other places in electrifying the big ports. But I think, yeah, in the smaller ports, the challenge is bigger. And there, yeah, if there is no other reason to electrify or to install other infrastructure like for methanol or hydrogen or whatever the future might bring, yeah, then it must be paid by somebody. So then there is much more an issue, I think, than in the bigger ports where maybe other drivers already are upgrading the infrastructure.
Great. And there's another question here from Scott Baker. Beyond compliance, I would suggest that design, manufacture and operations can move faster than regulators. Do we need, as a sector, to move the bar into progressive self-regulation? Rob, maybe you can start this one off.
Well, you know, I think to a large degree, the industry is almost there, except that, you know, we haven't abandoned the regulators, but I think we have transgressed them in many ways. You know, on the design side, you know, we certainly don't consider the rules and regulations that govern ship design to be the standard. You know, we go above and beyond that in almost every area. Because we believe that it should be better in many ways, in scantlings and subdivision and everything else. And yeah, regulators move very slowly, and the only thing that seems to prompt them, in my experience, is major fatalities and an incident. Yeah. Then you get a regulatory change. Yeah. That's not what we need. Technically, we're going far too fast for regulation. So in that regard, I think we are basically self-regulating right now.
Great. And Erik, you're waving your hand there.
Yeah, I agree with Robert, and I want to add to that a lot of new rules and regulations also are created yeah, in communication and also asked by design yeah, companies like us and like Robert. We had a lot of things in the past, like with the harmonized class rules and with the safety yeah, research activities, where there were big research programs where things were became clear, and a new regulation was made out of those research programs, which were more or less started and paid for a big part by the designers. And by the shipbuilders. So it's working together, but the trigger is most of the time coming from the industry and not from rules and regulations.
Right, just before we finish now, anybody like to give a concluding remark before we shut down? No? Okay, well, that's it from us. And just to thank Ben, Erik, Kasper and Rob for their excellent contribution. It has been a really, really good discussion. To Robert Merrilees hiding in the background there, and to our sponsors, AMP Group and Camel Led, for their support today. And to all of you for being with us this afternoon. Don't forget that the next plenary session coming up, we'll be in the second part of that under the Towage offshore wind and offshore part of it. But once again, thanks very much to all our contributors here. Thank you, guys.
Bye.
I'm going to leave, Steve.
Can I go back to bed now?
You can indeed, Rob.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. See you later.
Great, thanks.
Okay.
Bye.
Take care.
Thank you.